Well, it's our breaking news at this hour. The United States Supreme Court has set aside President Donald Trump's sweeping global tariffs. The highest court in the U.S. ruled that Trump exceeded his authority by imposing those tariffs on global trade. The majority court ruling says the International Emergency Economic Powers Act doesn't authorize the president to impose tariffs. The ruling, however, doesn't include sector-specific tariffs on imports of steel, aluminium, and various other goods. Now back to one of our top stories. Acting Police Minister Firoz Cachalia says the overall murder rate has dropped significantly over the previous quarter. Cachalia released the latest quarterly crime statistics for the period between October and December 2025. Let's make sense of these numbers with Professor Mofokeng from the Department of Criminology and Security Science at Unisa. Professor Mofokeng, thank you so much for joining us and a very good evening to you. I guess a good point to start would be at that decline in that murder rate by 8.7%.
Well, good evening, Masa, and good evening to Newzroom Afrika viewers. Thank you for having me. Yes, indeed. Well, I'm sure it is something that the public was looking forward to and something that is positive. However, we should also take into cognizance, the response by NPA to say that the drop in crime statistics, does not really mean that, we have such a success in terms of the conviction rate. We understand that, well, there has been some measures such as the deployment of South African Defence Force as well as other, community-related projects in terms of adherence to the State of Nation address, for the communities to be able to work, together with the South African Police Service, despite the challenges of, whistleblowers being eliminated because of what has been, submitted at both at ad hoc committee as well as Madanga Commission. So, however, while showing this statistical decline in murders and contact crimes, as being interpreted, we can be able to say that, well, we need to be able to also to accept these stats with a pinch of salt, due to the parallel revelations from these two entities.
And as you speak of a pinch of salt as well, just to quote the acting police minister, who also said that this does not necessarily translate into a false sense of security by individuals, families and communities. Basically an acknowledgement also from the acting police commissioner to say that these stats don't always translate to our lived experience on the ground. But Prof, if you could also just unpack to us the importance of having such statistics as well.
Well, it is important to be able to provide, to the wider communities as well as, business sector that indeed, there are mechanisms, to try to, reduce the crime rates. Remember, also for international, organizations, they always look at these particular states to be able to check if the SAPS, has indeed in control. It is important also to bring that kind of rare trust, towards the South African Police Service by communities, because it is not always okay that we keep on reporting that there is escalation of crime stats. It put a feeling of a lack of security, a paranoia where members of the community will, feel like indeed they are under siege. So it is important, if the Minister of the Police, provide with something that provide like a hope to indicate that indeed there is a particular progress towards addressing, crime and criminality within our communities.
Prof, an interesting development as well that we saw from the State of the Nation address and also from the response to the SONA debate. The president did make the announcement that the Defence Force will be deployed to the Cape Flats, but also added the Eastern Cape. Now, if we look at today's results, the statistics as well, it shows that the Western and Eastern Cape recorded much smaller decreases, and they are attributing this to gang violence. In lieu of that announcement made during the SONA period of sending the Defence Force, would that make a difference in the next crime stats that are being recorded for this period?
Well, it will depend on a variety of issues. Currently what, we are, witnessing in terms of the Matanga Commission, where, it is expected that we need to see certain senior, police officials, being arrested and convicted. But also, it will also be important that the South African Defence Force deployed in Eastern Cape, as well as certain, parts of the country, indeed, trying to address, the scourge of, organized crime as well as, gangsterism. We are aware that there is a huge circulation of firearms in South Africa, and whenever, there is a cash in transit or there is any other, robbery or violent crime, we see the excessive use of ammunition, with understanding that, of course, those individuals that are perpetuating those crimes, they are of the view that, based on what has been presented to us, that the forensic, division does not have that capacity to be able to link, cartridges found at the crime scene to those, perpetuated, whether, a particular firearm was used. It is also important that, probably this South African Defence Force to be able to, together with the South African Police Service, arrest whoever is suspected of, terrorizing. We know the cases of extortion as well as, gang-related violence in South Africa. So probably then when we get the next quarter of crime statistics, it will be providing that kind of direction that indeed, there was some kind of, return of investment. So the performance, in courts is also something that we look forward to. It is not only about the reduction of crime stats, but also we need to be able to see that cases that are presented before the court of law, they are of high quality. Hence, then the NPA, was a bit skeptical in terms of the reduction of crime stats. We look forward where, NPA will work together with general detectives. Remember, as much as we have the PKTT task teams, those that are specialized with, high caliber of experts, we still have a problem with general detectives that are, mad with a huge workload. And then, we had also of docket schooling or docket shopping where, because of corruption within the South African Police Service, these dockets will be moved from experienced detectives to low-ranking or, low experienced individuals for the sake of these cases. Whenever they are presented before the court of law, they will yield to low convictions or even, withdrawal. So it must be, the collaborations of NPA together with the South African Police Service, especially detectives, that they need to be able to be empowered so that whatever cases they're investigating, should yield to convictions before the court of law.
Yeah, and valid point when it comes to convictions as well versus the cases that have been reported. But lastly, Prof, before I let you go, if one looks at the crime stats for the same period for the previous year, there was a 9.8% decrease in murder cases. We've seen an 8.7% decrease for the same period the following year for 2025. What should we make of that slight difference in numbers?
It has not always been easy in terms of the conviction of these kinds of crimes. We are aware that there is a target set by NPA in terms of, raising the bar, to be able to bring confidence to the South African, communities. Remember, it takes time for certain cases to be investigated. It talks about, the availability of vehicles, the resources, the skills, but as well as the number of cases that are presented to the NPA. So, because they are the ones that will make a decision whether they continue with such cases. Hence, you'll find that over the years, there has been that, around 11 to 12% of conviction rate. So, hence then, we will probably, with the coming years, whenever there is the tightening of the criminal justice system, where individuals will be provided with the resources as well as a conducive environment, probably, we will see a slight increase to that particular number that we have indicated.
Prof. Mofokeng, unfortunately, we have run out of time. I would have liked to engage on that last one a little bit more, but thank you so much for your insights this evening.